Hello, I'm Liselle Sambury. I'm a young adult fantasy and sci-fi author, and welcome to my celebratory 2,000 subscriber Q&A. When I hit 1,000 subscribers, I did one over here, and so I thought I would do another one for 2,000, though this is a little bit belated since I hit 2,000 a little while ago, but I schedule my videos very far in advance, and so it didn't end up coming together until now, but I'm going to do the Q&A. You all were gracious enough to leave me questions on my YouTube community post and also on my Instagram stories, and so I'm going to answer those today. Yay! Let's go, starting with the YouTube community post. So Elaine says, do you have a list of story ideas that you keep or just focus on one at a time? If the former, do you know what you want to write next? This is interesting. So I do keep a list. I use my iPhone notes app to keep a list of what I call plot bunnies. So it's just when I have little like plot ideas, I'll go in there and I'll type up usually like a very small paragraph, sometimes just a sentence of what my idea is, and then I kind of move on from it. A lot of ideas I don't have fully fleshed out when they come to me, but I know I will forget if I don't write it down. And so then I'll jot it down just like very quickly in that way. Thinking about what I want to do next, I'm trying not to think about it too hard because I am kind of trying to figure out what I want to do for NaNoWriMo, but I'm going to do a prep tour video where you can watch me as I run through all of my ideas and panic and do the most to try and figure out what it is I'm going to do for Nano. So I'm trying to really keep it out of my head right now so that you can get the full experience during Preptober. Catherine says, what is your advice for a writer who is separated amicably from their agent and is looking to go back into the query trenches? So this I have significantly less expertise because I've been with the same agent the whole time. And I've also found that with friends, there is kind of, unless like there is, I find that often with friends, they'll be like, and now I have a new agent. And I'll be like, what happened? And then they'll backtrack on it. But to me, it's really like what I've garnered from watching their experiences is to really kind of just jump into it and just really go for it. But also kind of protecting yourself in that way. I have seen friends kind of jump into new agent relationships very quickly and get kind of burned by it. And so I think it's really important to think about what really didn't work for you with your past agent, and then going forward really kind of soliciting for those sorts of things, like when you're on calls with offers for a new agent, kind of making sure that you are at least primed, that you feel like you're not going to get into the same situation that you were, that made you kind of part with your last agent. And that doesn't mean that like parting with your last agent was bad, like as Catherine said, amicable. And it's just kind of finding the person that is the right fit for you, not necessarily that the last person was a bad fit. So I don't personally have experience. That's just kind of what I've garnered from friends. I think really something that would be really helpful would be to talk to people you know that have left agents and found other agents and really see what worked for them, because they'll have the best perspective on that, having done it before. Anna says, any tips for faster drafting? I remember you recommending Chris Fox's book and would love to hear how those techniques work for you. So throw my sponsored, not sponsored hat on. I read a book called 5,000 Words Per Hour by Chris Fox. Again, this is not sponsored, but I really liked the book and it really helped me. It's like a super fast read. You can read it in like 45 minutes, but essentially the book is about how to use techniques to write faster. And for me, it was really helpful. I went from writing 500 words in 20 minutes to writing 1,000 words in 20 minutes, which is awesome for me. But I won't like spoil his book because it's really only $1 and I don't want to like take that $1 from Chris Fox after he works so hard. But essentially it's a lot of doing sprinting, focusing in, and like, but it does rely very heavily on you plotting and you planning things beforehand. So I think if you are a pantser and you're very resistant to doing any sort of that plotting, I don't know how well the method will work for you. For me, I'm a very like strict plotter, and so it really helped me. Also, I'll say that my issue with writing slower wasn't because I like physically type slower or because I'm like getting caught up in the words. My writing slower was because I would stop a lot and just kind of like look off into the trees and like consult my notes. And like when I was wasting time during writing, it was just because I was head in the clouds, and that was my issue. And so his techniques really helped me focus in and like focus really hard for those 20 minutes when I'm writing, so that I'm not wasting time, so that I'm getting the most work done in that small period of time. And so I think that's what really worked for me. But yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out his book. I will link it below, and then you can check it out yourself. But the techniques were really helpful for me, and a friend, I also like pushed them to do it. I was like, check out this book. And they said that it really, really helped them, and that it's been helping them make a lot more progress, and they've been really happy after reading it. So I recommend it. Marina says, hi Liselle, any adult contemporary books outside of fantasy and sci-fi you read lately with a good female main character? I don't often read adult contemporary. That's not because I don't like it. I actually do really like adult contemporary. I just tend to get caught up in like young adult fantasy titles, and like now I'm reading horrors to kind of help me with my own horror. So that's really the reason why I haven't read a lot of adult contemporaries. But one that I read this year that I'm absolutely in love with. Oh gosh, things have gone awry. My Dark Vanessa. I actually have a physical book. Can you believe it? I got this ARC at an event in Toronto when we still went to in-person events. Can you believe that was this year? But My Dark Vanessa, I adore this book. I love it. I thought it was so good. I will say, what's the word I'm looking for? Trigger warning. So it is a book about sexual assault. It is from a teenager and an adult point of view, the same person. So it involves sexual assault of a minor. And some parts are like quite graphic. So if that's like not for you, and you know that that's not something you can handle, I would say steer clear, and like be aware of those trigger warnings. But for me, I thought it was really, really good. There were a lot of things that to me really rang true for like being someone who has gone through sexual assault like that. Those feelings felt really authentic to me, even though, you know, it's different situations. And so that really rang true for me. And I think it had so many poignant points about how girls can be groomed by older men, about how assault can be so complicated, like that it's not always cut and dry, especially in situations where there is grooming involved and that sort of thing. And so I thought it was amazing. I gave it 5 stars. It's one of my favorite reads of the whole year. And I think that's the only adult contemporary I can think of that I've read this year, I think, which is funny. It's like, this is the only one I've read. Yeah, I haven't read any others in a good love, but this one is definitely highly recommend, but be aware of the trigger warnings. This is from Sierra. What advice would you give to someone who wants to join AuthorTube? Do we have to give writing advice? No, you do not have to give writing advice on AuthorTube. In fact, I think if you don't feel confident in the advice that you're giving, you probably shouldn't be giving advice. That's kind of my point on that. So you really don't have to give writing advice. I think a lot of people do really well on AuthorTube just showing their own journey, like doing writing vlogs and talking about, you know, if they're trying new writing techniques, or if they're joining a writing challenge like Millwordy or NaNoWriMo. Or I think people are really interested in seeing other people's journeys. And as long as you're like yourself, just present yourself how you are, you'll find people that like watching your journey and like sticking along with you. You definitely do not have to give advice. I give advice on like traditional publishing and like publishing and that sort of thing, because I don't see in AuthorTube that there's a ton of people in the traditional author space, and then less that are becoming, well, I'm like soon to become traditionally published authors. And so I like giving that insight because when I was in the position of like querying and stuff, it was really helpful for me to find those videos. And so I kind of wanted to pay it forward in doing those videos myself and kind of sharing my own experiences. But even then, I do that all through the lens of like, this is my own experience. And I don't do craft advice because I don't really feel confident enough to like be like, this is what you should do. I'm more just like, this is what I do because that's what I feel comfortable doing. So I would say if you're wanting to start an AuthorTube, do what you feel comfortable doing. Don't force yourself to do all the stuff that you think you should be doing on AuthorTube. And in fact, I think the great thing about when new people come onto AuthorTube is that you have this opportunity to kind of do something completely different. I think it can be really easy if you've been on AuthorTube for a while to kind of become, you kind of find your brand, so to speak, and you're doing a certain type of video. And I think when you're newer, you can kind of like, you can do whatever you want. And it's cool to see new people come on and start doing different things from other people, because I think that's what makes the content in the community as a whole much more interesting and diversified. So definitely don't have to give writing advice. Camille says, pretend you are retirement age, fill in the blanks with your ideal answers. So over the course of my career, I've published blank books. You may know me for blank. My greatest accomplishment was blank. Oh gosh, let's just put it here. I'm gonna go pie in the sky dreams. So over the course of my career, I published 50 books. You may know me for my many books about messy Black girls. My greatest accomplishment was being a #1 New York Times bestseller. This is actually really fun. Yeah, I guess it's like pie in the sky dreams. I don't know how many books people can legitimately publish over their career. Like some people have published like a wild number of books, but to me, I wouldn't see myself publishing like more than one book per year. So in pie in the sky, if I publish one book every single year, I feel like 50 at retirement age, so that would be past retirement age, but let's say like deathbed, that would be like a very good number. Like I would feel very accomplished about that. And of course, if I was a #1 New York Times bestseller, that would be wonderful. So, or my biggest accomplishment was, you may know me from the #1 blockbuster hit movies based on my books or something like that. Pie in the sky dreams. Miss Woman of Color Reader says, what advice would you give to an author of color querying YA? So I think, I'm trying to think of like a culminative piece of advice. I think my biggest piece of advice with authors of color is kind of don't count yourself out. Don't accept less because you feel like you don't have a place in the industry. Don't settle for a schmagent. Don't sign with an agent that you don't feel comfortable with because you feel like you just kind of have to accept bare bones. Don't feel like you have to compromise your story. Any agent that wants to push you to write, specific own voices story, or to write pain narratives, or to, why don't you write something more about your own culture? Like any agent that's telling you to do that stuff, that's not a good agent for you. As a person of color, you shouldn't be forced to write about your very specific experience, and you shouldn't be forced to write about specific narratives because that's what people are expecting of you in particular. And so I think, don't sell yourself short, and also watch your back and make sure that you are going to be in safe environments as much as you possibly can. That's what I would say. What has changed about your writing process from when you first started writing to now? So many things. Mostly organization. I was a very, very disorganized writer when I first started. I would just kind of sit down and write whatever. I was like a full pantser. I had no plan. I would just sit down and write whatever. And I think that works really well for some people, but it did not work well for me, because then I would get to the middle and it would just be like junk. Nothing would really be happening. My books were a lot shorter because I didn't know where I was going really, and I would kind of get bored in the middle, and then I just rush to the end without necessarily like doing any sort of character development. They were also extremely plot driven and less kind of character driven, which is the way I do things now. Now I'm very organized. I have a system that I go back to that I use again and again. So I use Save the Cat, and I use some of the Story Genius tips. And I am like quite a bit more organized. There are still some chaotic aspects, like I still pants my magic systems and my world building, though I am going to try very hard to change that for NaNoWriMo. But yeah, I was just very disorganized as a writer when I started, and now I'm like very organized, and I have a system that I go back to. I think that's really been the biggest change, is that I didn't have a tried and true system that I could rely on to write my stories, and now I do. And I think that's a reason why I can write stories a lot faster now and have a much faster turnaround, because I have such a ingrained process for how I put my stories together now. Miguel says, what are your tips to new writers? Find out as much as you can about writing. Like, just try and learn as much as you can. Read a bunch of craft books. Find writing communities that you can talk to other people and feel supported and be part of that community. Learn as much as you can. Watch YouTube videos about writing. Watch YouTube videos of other people in their writing journeys. Get as much education and knowledge as you possibly can, because I think that's what ended up helping me the most. When I started writing, I really was consulting nothing about writing. I was really only working off of what I was reading. But when I started learning more about writing, I just found that things got so much better, and I improved so much more just by learning about it. And of course, I will also say reading. Read what you want to write. So if you want to write young adult fantasy, read a bunch of young adult fantasy. If you want to write adult contemporary, read a bunch of adult contemporary. Really, really read a lot in your genre, especially if you're seeking traditional publishing, because it'll help you kind of see what other books are out there, what the market is like, and also help you know how you can differentiate yourself and your story. So that's the advice I would give to new writers. CT says, any tips for creating and committing to a writing routine? I am bad at this advice, and I will admit that I am bad at this advice when it comes to committing to a writing routine, because I am aware that I am strange. So when I set myself a routine and deadlines, I just sit down and I do it. That's just kind of how I am. I've always thrived on deadlines and routine. And so for me, it's really simple for me to just like, I go in my Google Calendar and I jot out. I actually have a whole video over here about my writing routine and how I organize all of my writing, where I talk more about how I organize my Google Calendar. But I look at that and it tells me what I have to do for the day, and I just sit down and I do it. So I'm not a good person to give advice on establishing writing routine if you're struggling with that, because I don't struggle with it. And so I hesitate to be like, just like get a Google Calendar and like get all this stuff in order, because I think that works really well for me, because that's just how I've always been. I think if you're struggling with creating a writing routine, I think kind of finding resources from people that have previously struggled, that have now kind of found a routine, but also yourself trying out a bunch of routines and seeing what works best for you, because I think that's really how you're going to get the best idea of what is helpful for you, is just to try a bunch of things until you kind of hit on something that really resonates with you in your process. True Cherry Girl says, what's a genre you'd love to write in but haven't written yet? I think my answer for this is a thriller. Like, that's the one that sticks in my head most solidly, because I do read thrillers. I mostly read adult thrillers, actually. I don't read a lot of young adult thrillers. I think I've only read two. Anyway, I read quite a bit, not quite a bit, but I read adult thrillers generally. I like specifically like ones where they're like an investigator and stuff. Anyway, that's besides the point. But I've never written anything close to a thriller. I've never even attempted it. I would one day like to try. I feel like it would be hard for me to do a thriller and not add a fantasy element to it. So I'd want to do like a fantasy thriller somehow. But fantasy or sci-fi. Oh yes, a sci-fi thriller. I actually did have an idea for a sci-fi thriller. I'm not even gonna get into it because I'll save that for my Preptober video where I agonize over what project I want to work on next. But I would really like to do a thriller one day. Brittany says, what's your biggest writing related goal? Right now, to sell another set of books. I think my biggest goal always shifts, and I think there are always like pie in the sky kind of dreams, but I wouldn't say there were goals. Like, sure, it would be cool to like have a TV show or that sort of thing, but I don't count it as a goal because it's not something I can strive towards achieving. Like, it relies on other people so much. And selling a book, it does feel like I have more stake in it than I do something like a movie deal or being on a New York Times bestseller list, that sort of thing. So my biggest writing goal right now is to sell my horror whenever I'm finished editing it. So that's kind of, yeah, that's it. The Dawdling Writer says, are you hoping to do the cover art or illustrations for your future books? I am not. I think book cover art is something very specific, and I think it's really kind of up to them to do it. And it's very rare also that you would do your own cover illustration in young adult or like middle grade in traditional publishing. I think if you're an illustrator by trade, that's something different. I do know a couple authors that are illustrators, like full-time, well, not full-time, but like they're illustrators by their own trade, and that's like their special skill. And so it makes sense in some cases that they get to do their own cover design. I am nowhere near that level, and so I do not expect to do any of that, and I in fact do not want to, because if I did my own cover, it wouldn't look nice. So no, it's a nope on that. Oh, KaShay says, what made you want to be a mentor? So if you didn't know, I am a mentor in the Avengers of Color mentorship. This is a mentorship that happens kind of in the summer. This was our second year doing it. Right now I'm actually going to be reading through my entries to try and see who I want to mentor. But I wanted to be a mentor. I think to me it's like part of that paying it forward thing. Like, it's rewarding for me to be able to help someone out with their story and to kind of, you're essentially being a critique partner. I think that's the thing that like is not as clear in like mentorship programs, is you're essentially being like a beta reader or sort of critique partner, but you're someone that has more experience in the industry than the person that you are mentoring. And so like that's kind of what I do in Authortube anyways. I'm really trying to help share what I've learned with people who are maybe at an earlier stage in that process. And so to me, it's kind of like a natural fit to do the mentorship. I like doing the Avengers of Color mentorship specifically because it is helping BIPOC in the industry, and also it's a commitment to like a first 25 pages in a query package. So it's more of a helping polishing, which I also really appreciate. I don't know that I have the time to do like a full manuscript commitment, maybe in the future, but right now I think I'm a little too frazzled with the whole debut thing. But yeah, definitely just kind of wanting to pay it forward. And last year with my mentors, it was really great. I loved their stories so much. They're both still working on them, but it was really cool just connecting with them. And it was so fun when I went to London, way back when you could travel in the world. I actually got to hang out with one of my mentors. They live in around London, and it was really awesome that I got to like sit down with them and like face to face. And my other mentee does live in Toronto, but we haven't been able to meet up yet, but that'll be something we'll be able to do in the future. But yeah, that's all really exciting for me. Emily said, why are you so cute? I don't know. I was born this way. That's my friend Emily. So I will move on from this now. Kevin said, do you ever think you'll write a contemporary? Do you think you'll ever write a contemporary? So I felt very strongly that I would not, but I recently had an idea, And so here's the thing. I don't think I would ever write a straight contemporary. I don't see that ever being my thing. But I'm kind of now getting into this space in where I'm like kind of interested in doing a little bit of spec fic. So it would essentially be a full contemporary, but with a little speculative twist, I think, in the vein of like Adam Silvera, like they both die at the end, that sort of thing. So I think that's as close as I would get to doing a contemporary. I don't think I would ever do straight contemporary. I cannot picture myself doing it because I always want to add in some sort of fantasy or sci-fi element. So Trisha says, are you working on anything not under... Trisha says, are you working on anything not under contract? How is it different than before? So yes, so my horror that I'm working on is not under contract, so it has not been sold. It is not my option book. We will still show it to my publisher first, but it's not something that has already been purchased or is under contract. How is it different from before? It doesn't seem that different, and I think this is the thing. I have already like pitched 2 other books to my agent, which I then sort of half wrote, and then when I finished, but it didn't work out. So then I've kind of already gotten into this cycle of showing my agent new projects. And this just happens to be the new project that I've shown her, that I've finished, that I have wanted to complete and that we've both felt really good about. And so it doesn't feel that much different from like being under contract, except that I'm only working with my agent right now to edit it versus also working with an editor. But I think it does feel very different from when I was doing things without an agent at all, because I found my difficulty with when I was editing books without an agent is that I would do betas and then I would just do constant rounds of CP and beta feedback, and it was kind of hard for me to tell when I was hitting on things, or that sometimes I would feel like I was getting kind of conflicting feedback in some cases. But now I have like a really strict process in that I write my first draft, I self-edit it, I send it to betas, I edit based on beta feedback, and then I send it to my agent, and then we edit it until we feel it is ready for submission. And so it feels like just more of a regimented process than before an agent, but it doesn't really feel that much different than like working on a contracted book, because I still set my own personal deadlines. So it still has deadlines in a sense. And also my deadlines for my contracted books are really generous. So I never really feel like I'm like on deadline because my deadlines are so like doable for me. Laura says, what has been the most surprising thing you've experienced after getting your book deal? I'm trying to think if there's anything surprising that I've experienced. I don't know. I think there have definitely been moments where I've gotten very touchy-feely about realizing that my book is going to be a full book, especially like when I was doing things like acknowledgements. I was kind of like, oh wow, this is like gonna come together as a real book. But I think I expected that feeling as well. I don't think that was surprising to me in any way. It's been kind of, I feel like because I was so overly prepared and so researched everything, that nothing feels particularly surprising to me, because in the back of my head I have so many expectations from all the things that I've learned. So yeah, that's kind of my answer. Author S.L. Rinaldi says, can you talk about Publishers Weekly? Is it something I need to be looking at? So Publishers Weekly, I honestly don't even know how to describe it, but the long and short of it is, for example, they send out different sorts of email subscriptions. And one of those you can get is the Children's Bookshelf. So this is a free newsletter subscription that you can sign up for. And every Tuesday and Thursday, Tuesdays only during the summer, but the rest of the year, Tuesdays and Thursday, or something like that. It's only once a week during the summer and twice a week every other time. They'll email you, and what they'll list is they'll list all the newly announced book deals. So I'm subscribed to this newsletter because I'm nosy as hell and I like to see what the newest book deals are happening. For me, there's also some like more practical reasons for looking. For example, I like to see if a certain genre of book starts to pick up a little bit more, because it kind of gives me more of an idea of like genres that are kind of more up and coming. This won't really always dictate what sort of stories that I want to write, but it can kind of push me a little bit. Like there was a point on Children's Marketplace, I'd already been thinking about writing a horror, but then like a couple people had announced horrors that were authors I really admired, and it made me feel like, okay, there's like room for horror. And of course I asked my agent, and she also agreed that there was, and so that was really helpful for me. It also kind of like gives me an idea of, timelines also. So like when we were going on submission in a certain period of time, deals that were being announced, and kind of seeing whether spring was being filled up already or whether summer was being filled up already, and that sort of thing, to kind of see like, okay, if we got a book deal now, when could I maybe expect the book to be published? That sort of thing. Do you need to be subscribed to them? I don't think so. I think in some ways it's nice because you can kind of see the market trends. I think, you know, maybe when you're not on submission, it's cool to look at those deals and be subscribed to that one because it's free, and it gives you a chance to look at the deals. And if you're a querying writer, it can also give you a chance to see which agents are kind of popping up with book deals, that sort of thing. So you can kind of get an idea of, okay, like this agent is like kind of fairly regularly showing up in these deal reports. It doesn't mean that agents that aren't regularly showing up in the deal reports won't be good agents. It just kind of gives you a little bit of an overview, a top level overview, but I don't think you need to be on it. And I say this because I know many friends who, when they go on submission, they do not look at those emails, because when you were on submission, and I like also didn't have emails when I was on submission, but when you were on submission and you were trying to sell a book, and then you were subscribed to an email list that tells you all the people who aren't you that are selling books, it can be really depressing. And so I get why people who are on submission aren't really subscribed to them. I think it's cool if you subscribe to, like, if you write YA and middle grade and picture books, I think the Children's Bookshelf email newsletter is really cool to subscribe to. I'll have the link below. I'm nosy as hell, so I like looking at those deals. So that's my 2 cents on it. Navia says, who gave you the first boost of confidence that made you realize you were good at writing? I think this was definitely my high school English teachers. So pretty much up until high school, I hadn't really shown anyone else my writing. And then when I was 15, I like got up the confidence to join my high school's writing club. And so you basically like wrote and you read aloud to people, and they could like critique your work and say, oh, I like this, or like maybe you can work on this, whatever. Because we were in high school and we were afraid to like say critiques to people, a lot of it in the beginning was like, I like this, without like any critique, but we evolved beyond that later. But yeah, I guess it wasn't even specifically my high school English teacher. It was like being in that group, and the first time I had read a piece and like everybody wanted to pipe up to say what they had liked about it. That was when I really felt like, oh, I could be good at this. And then over time in like doing the writing club, like that really helped build up my confidence. And by the time I was in my senior year, I was the leader of the writing club. And so I had built up a lot more confidence in my writing being good and feeling like it was good. For me, it's hard for me to tell on my own if my writing is like hitting well with people. So I really do rely on like getting beta reader feedback to kind of help me out. I can still enjoy and think my writing is good without that, but that gives me that extra boost of confidence. So yeah, my high school writing club was definitely where I first got that very first boost of confidence. And author Phoebe Ross, who does have a Authortube channel. All the Authortubers who ask questions, I will link them down below so that you can find them. But author Phoebe Ross says, what does your dream book launch look like? At this point, in person? I think it's like as far as the dream goes. I think pre-COVID, I had a lot more lofty ideas about what I wanted my book launch to look like. I wanted to, of course, have it in like an indie bookstore, but I like wanted to have like little like desserts and like cupcakes and stuff that like were themed to the book cover. And because of all the Trinidadian food in the book, I wanted to like have a little bit of catering, you know, maybe a little fueling, you know, some pilori balls or something like that, a little tamarind sauce, some stuff like that, some little Caribbean treats for people to kind of represent the book. And I wanted to like have this whole conversation thing where I like found an author friend so that we could have a back and forth conversation instead of me just sitting there staring at everyone. And like I thought it would be great. I would want all these like swag items that I could give out to people and like enamel pins, and like that was like my pie in the sky launch. And then I wanted to be able to like stream it live on YouTube at the same time, likely with the help of a friend, but like that's all the stuff I really wanted. And now because of how COVID has been, so many things are shifted. I'm like, I'd like to think that by summer next year it would be cool to do an in-person event, but I don't truly know. But right now I think that's like the biggest, my dream of launches is I really hope that I can do it in person and that it'll be safe to do it in person. And that is it for this Q&A video. I hope you liked and enjoyed it. I was really excited to do it, and I'm really excited to be at 2,000 subscribers. Thank you so much to everybody who has subscribed. It's wild times. I did not expect to go from 1,000 to 2,000 in this period of time, and so that's been really exciting. And I guess if I want to reflect, have a 2,000 subscriber reflection, I am happy that I've gotten into doing a bit more live streams, because those kind of hosting them myself used to be a sort of scary thing, and since then I've been able to host a few as part of larger events and then host one fully on my own, hosting with a bunch of friends as guests, which was really awesome and really fun. And I'm really thankful to have 2,000 subscribers, and here's to 1,000 more lofty goals. But yeah, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. I post videos every Tuesday at the very minimum. Every once in a while, I'll come out with another one, depending, but at least once a week. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!